Everyone, I'm Victoria Jetty.
Recording in progress.
I'm going to call this meeting of the Addison Central School District to order today, Monday the 14th. And we'll start with introductions.
Bill Hatch, Technology Director.
Joanna Doria.
Mary Gill.
Jamie McCallum.
Chip Malcolm.
Peter Burrow, Superintendent.
Victoria Jetty.
Mary Heather Noble.
Lindsay Hescott.
Brian Bauer.
Nargis Anzali, Student Representative.
Steve Warzak.
Jen Musier.
And we should have a couple people joining us on Zoom.
Suzanne Buck, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi.
Great. Before we get started with public comments and introduction of, or announcement of who's here, I just had a quick, since we have so many people in the room, December's board meetings are going to be altered due to the holidays, so they'll be on December 12th and December 19th. And the board has also decided to shift start times to 5:30 from here on out to try to accommodate some longer meetings.
Before we do, we have in the past. Yeah.
The 5th, oh, I'm looking at 12. 12 would be the month.
Yes.
5 would be the day, yes. The
Okay.
5th and the 19th. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah.
Yep,
So not the
Covered them all
12th?
now.
not the 12th. The 5th and the 19th, starting at 5:30.
The dates are right in board packet.
And we'll still get the budget summary on the 5th?
I'm not sure what the review will be.
The first
Yeah.
draft
But-
will be the 19th after we get our equalized people.
Okay.
And just in the past, we've read
Yep,
attendees. Is
yep,
that okay?
yep. So now, just I want to make those announcements. Let's, if Will, you could read attendees, that'd be great.
We have Allison Newrock, Ben Kay, Pete Bergolf, Willie Blistein, Aaron Davis, John Flowers, Lori, MCTV, Nancy Crawford, Steve Zwicky, Wendy Leeds.
Great, thank you. At this time, as always, we're open to public comment. Just to give me an idea, if you're here for public comment, could you raise your hand? Okay, and online, if you would like to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand as well. I'm going to try to keep public comment to 30 minutes so that we can we got a lot on the agenda. So just a reminder that individual public comment should be tried to be kept to 3 minutes. We're going to keep the total to around 30 minutes and see how many we can accommodate. All right, so who'd like to start us off? Why don't we start with the folks in the room and then we'll move to those online who want to make a public comment. They're in the green shirt.
Peter Nitch from Shoreham. I'm going to abbreviate what I have in mind. I understand there's a proposal that's on the table at the moment. I strongly encourage you to vote that way. In my view, it's fine voting into the fire. Someone in the independent last Thursday pointed out that the town school was closed that way and give the voters in that town the sense that the other towns were pitted against them. That's not a healthy situation for this district. There's, for a long time, I've heard people talk about how we're all one big family. And I can tell you that in towns like mine, in Shoreham, there are many people who feel like, well, maybe in the Dickensian sense of four relations that are just barely tolerated at the end of the St. Stephen's Day feast table. Peter Conlon mentioned trying to keep the temperature down. I think really the only way to do it is to turn the final decision over to the town in question. If this board can present a convincing, well-thought-out argument, the voters in Shoreham would listen if there was a really strong argument for closing the school. And if the board can't successfully present an argument of that quality, then the school should not be closed. Okay? I'm going to read just a little bit from James Rebanks, who was a Scottish farmer and became a man of letters. His first book is called The Shepherd's Life, and he's a 9th generation shepherd from the north of England. And this is from the introduction, so he's referring to the book you're about to read. It says, "It is the story of a family and a farm, but also tells a wider story about the people who get forgotten in the modern world. It's about how we need to open our eyes and see the forgotten people who live in our midst, whose lives are often deeply traditional and rooted in the distant past. If we want to understand the people in the foothills of Afghanistan, we need to try to understand the people in the foothills of England first." He might have well meant in other parts of Addison County. I hope that you can understand that each of our towns has very unique and different qualities and cultures to bring to the table. And we really need all these towns to be fully engaged in this district. And right now, the distance is too great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was actually going to just make a suggestion. I don't know whether Tim's ready to speak, but I think some of us are actually probably best positioned to speak after Tim had something that he wanted to say. So I'm just going to make that suggestion.
Hi everyone, my name is Tim O'Leary. I live in Ripton. I also worked within this district for 17 years. Last 5 I've worked at Champlain Valley School District. I come here to talk about Article 14. After witnessing the robust conversation last meeting, it really left me wondering not which answer is right, but how can we have a better pathway to an answer that is sustaining for our community. Mary Heather Noble, I read your Facebook post yesterday and got to meet you in person for the first time. And well, I think you write convincingly for a district-wide vote. I think you're right. And Matt Cox, called sometimes the godfather of the Save Our Schools movement, with every fiber in his being wants a town vote to be part of a change to Article 14. And I think you're right. And Steve, I think you talked about last meeting, maybe the only voice that said you weren't totally interested in a charter change. And I think you're right too. And so I wonder how we can have all of these opinions, with their differences, all be right. So I think we have to find a better way to an answer that doesn't just lead to more politicking at the next board elections. I think we got a lot right as a district when we consolidated a number of years ago, but there's not many people, I don't think, who would say we got this right. And I think it's time to ask the voters to weigh in, not on a particular change, but on a couple options for a change. And with that in mind, we drafted a petition to see if others believed in that pathway too. I presented it to the SOS group last Sunday. It was not well received right away because it put 2 options on the table in front of the voters. But after a long discussion, we kind of resolved around it. And in the last 6 days, started collecting signatures. Well, we don't have 5% of the electorate here tonight on signatures. There's 420 signatures here. 270 of them are from Middlebury. And they all ask the board to ask the electorate to weigh in on this question. Should a school be closed by a district-wide vote, or should a school be closed by the vote of a town in which is being impacted? So you spoke many of your own truths last time. I'm sure your email inbox has been bombarded with other people's truths, and you'll hear more tonight than you just heard from Peter Lynch. And so while all of those truths are important, I just ask you to consider the pathway to find a collective truth that will sustain over time and won't just be kicked down the road to the next board election and come up again a year from now. Thanks.
Hi, Chris Kramer, here from Cornwall. I'm going to put my FOCS hat on for 1 second and just say welcome and thank you. I'm the co-chair of Friends of Cornwall, so thank you all for being here. And now that hat comes off and I'll speak just as me. And actually, I think I can keep it to 30 seconds. I just wanted to say I really support the idea of the petition that Tim brought up. I think it's been 6 years since we first voted on consolidation, kind of all came together as voters to do that. I think realistically, we understood this time around that putting forward a petition just for a town vote just doesn't have enough support on its own. So this is why we felt like we should ask voters to choose between either a town vote or a district-wide vote. We can have that discussion, and then voters can actually weigh in. I think one of the most difficult things that we've all experienced over the last 6 years is a feeling of how do we connect voters and the board. And I don't think that's really the fact that there's been a feeling of disconnection is, sorry, there's more than 30 seconds, but really anybody's fault. I think it's probably just structural. I think it's, people are busy. It's hard to get to board events. I think there actually have been, and there are public board meetings like this one every 2 weeks. But I just think that there's just this feeling of like, how do we get way back in? And so I think the hope is that giving this choice to voters, which is the most important choice, I think, on a lot of people's minds when it comes to the school district, would help them feel reinvested in the process. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Matt Cox from Ripton, and I wanted to compliment Mary Heather Noble on the letter that she wrote and posted on Front Porch Forum. I have one contention with it, though, the part where it says that Ripton is an example of the extent to which a town will go to keep its school open despite the costs. And I want to remind people here that we voted to come back into the district. That was because the majority of the town felt it would be impossible for us to financially maintain our school without supervisory union services. So we voted to come back in. But I also want to have a contention with comments that were made at the last board meeting in which the system that we have right now was described as being democratic. And it's democratic for some people. For me in Ripton, it's not democratic at all, and I'll explain why, okay? Up until about a year ago, we had a preschool program at Ripton School. And this was a program that we put in place when the school was under the town's control and we had our own school board. And then at a certain point, the board took the funding away for our preschool. And this was at a time when finding places for young children for childcare was a critical issue. It still is. But we still don't have our preschool. It cost the huge sum of $23,000. And it was taken out. So we could have voted against the budget with our 450 votes. And a lot of us did. But it wouldn't have made any difference. Nobody asked us if we wanted to close. It was a benefit for the town. It was a benefit for the children of the town. And now we don't have it anymore. And it's because we're so small. And I also want to point out that we funded and ran our school for 26 years. It was not a financial hardship for the town. We passed the budget every year, the budget that our school board presented, up until Act 46. Up until that point, our town was not a problem. Now it's a problem, and it's because of Act 46. So I'm just letting people know that the system we have right now excludes the right of people in small towns to have an adequate voice in what happens with their children. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Tanya Scuteri from Shoreham, and I'm also going to comment on the charter change. And as others have said, I think there are valid points on both sides. As the district-wide vote, that does have us vote as one educational community. On the other side, the town vote reflects the disparate and disproportionate impact that closure would have on the students and community in which the school would be closed. And I think the implication that as rural voters, we would not be receptive to a well-thought-out argument and a well-planned path forward really demonstrates a lack of understanding and a lack of confidence and a lack of respect for the rural voters. And so to follow along what others have said, I support allowing the district as a whole to vote on this charter change because it is significant and we voted as all 7 towns on the original agreement, so why not put it to the voters to make this very important change? Thank you.
Hi, Hugh McLaughlin, Middlebury. I'm here to speak about the facility master planning process. First, this fall, Cornwall has the largest number of elementary school students in Addison Central District, outside Middlebury. I believe the primary factor driving its recent growth in enrollment is the high quality of learning that goes on in this building. Okay, so if potential buyers, home buyers or renters want to check the latest assessment results on the Vermont Educational Dashboard, they'll see that the Bingham School is outperforming the average of other elementary schools in the district on the 2021 test, which are the latest. Unfortunately, Weybridge is so small that we can't find out whether they match or beat them because if you don't have 11 students in each grade, they don't report the results. Okay, so we don't know how other things are. I came from Massachusetts where we have the MCAS. I taught in Lawrence. I taught in Chelsea. That changed how we taught when our public school scores were posted out there and raised the level. So that's it. My comment here is congratulations to Cornwall students and teachers on the great outcomes that are occurring at this school and demonstrating that quality matters when attracting new students to an elementary school. So that's what we want to have with all our elementary schools. I will be honest, if my grandchildren lived in Cornwall, I would be upset that the school board has explored alternatives that would send students living in Cornwall to an elementary school in Salisbury. And it is yet to communicate that this option is no longer being considered. Okay? I think it's time for the board to resolve some of the uncertainty for Cornwall residents and others by voting to say that at least 4 elementary schools will remain through 2030 if the state doesn't change its rules. And I would choose the 4 largest to cut down people traveling, students traveling on buses. So the 4 largest schools are Mary Hogan, Bingham Memorial here, Shoreham, and Salisbury. Keeping these large schools open, including 2 west of Otter Creek, will reduce the total amount of time of elementary schools. This will address some of the lingering uncertainty that's here because anybody in an outlying town cannot be assured that their school is going to be open. Okay, the only one that everybody seems to be confident in is Mary Hogan. There is a trade-off between keeping all 7 existing schools open and the number of courses and activities being offered at the local high school. As a result of the recent vote, the Vergennes High School, where I substitute some days, is facing tough decisions for next year because roughly 5 out of every 6 classes, according to are below class size minimums set by policy. 23% of all classes in the high school have single digits as their enrollment. That, as a teacher and a substitute teacher, does not provoke great learning from my experience. This suggests that there will be cuts in staff and course offerings next fall in the Addison Northwest. So what I have and what I would like to introduce as a question is how small of an elementary school is too small to meet the high standards that we have here in the Addison Central. And I don't believe that we can have a good discuss, if we don't discuss that type of issue, we could end up with Lake Elmore, where you have between 13 and 22 students, which is actually the same number of students in one of the grades at Shoreham High School, Shoreham Elementary School now, and they're prepared, and by 2030, we'll have to think about and revisit this issue again. So my comment is, how small is too small, and let's see if we can do something about it. I'm willing to hear and have a conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you to the board for the opportunity to comment. My name is Roxanne Vogt, and I'm speaking tonight as a parent in Weybridge with a very enthusiastic kindergartner at Weybridge Elementary. I moved to Weybridge in part because our elementary school, which provides for its residents not only high-quality, accessible public education, but in our small town is a place to build relationships with neighbors through school activities, volunteerism, and hosting community events such as our community picnic every year. This school is the center of our community. I support an amendment to the district charter in which school closure requires a supermajority vote of the ASD school board and the majority vote of the attached town. Towns will be most impacted by the decision to close their schools, as well as most familiar with the context and the nuance of the decision, and should have the opportunity to come to the decision about the future of their school, which is also a decision about the future of their community at the town level. While our ASCD school board members have made a commitment through their volunteerism to generously donate their time to understanding the complexity of these issues, most people in our district are just trying to get through their days. And even with good intentions, won't have the capacity to fully understand the implications of those decisions. A vote for the future of our district schools should be decided by those who can contribute the most informed decision-making and will be most impacted by the decision. Thank you.
We have about 10 minutes, and so I'm gonna turn to Zoom for a moment and see if there's anyone online who would like to make a public comment. Please raise your Zoom hand.
Sorry, Roxanne, do you mind just repeating your last name for me, please?
Vote, B as in Vermont, O-U-G-H-T.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see anyone.
There's one more.
Okay. Oh, good. You see that one. Molly.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Nope.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Hi. Sorry, I wish I could be there. I'm on call away from up in Milton. I just want to thank you all for hosting this meeting, and I just want to plant a suggestion that I've brought up before, which is that if we really reconcile as a board and as a bunch of communities that we can't empower our communities to be able to make decisions about their school, that we really need to consider that we can't function as a unified district, and that we should revert to a supervisory union model. And I think I'll just leave that there, but I want everyone on the board to consider that there are plenty of high-functioning, well-run supervisory unions still existing in the state of Vermont that do a really good job valuing a complexity and a diversity of community size. And so if we can't do that as a unified district, that perhaps we should all go meet with the State Board of Education, which I know a lot about, and ask them to revert us to one where each community can indeed decide, so Middlebury doesn't feel so burdened by us small communities, and us small communities don't feel so threatened by a consolidated district. So just want to leave that line of thought open to the future.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Yes.
Jim Ziegler from Ripton. There's a lot to say here, but I'm just going to try to keep it very brief. Speaking specifically to the facilities question and the cost of maintenance of facilities, I have a background in facilities. I was on a school board for a number of years, Conservation Commission, firefighter for decades in multiple states in New England. I understand this fairly well. I was a builder for years. The question, the $110 million toward facilities, the $2 million for Ripton, these numbers are not carefully drilled down into. This was an overblown rough draft of a presentation that does not get into the nitty-gritty and the detail. And what I mean by that is it's too much money, and these are not realistic numbers. And so to use that as a political talking point for whether or not we should have the power to, as a small town, which you can clearly see we're all passionate about our small communities, to vote. To use that as a political talking point, I think is very cool. I think these numbers are scare tactics. I think that having it printed in the Addy the week after the article was printed about whether or not the board might come to a change of Article 14 was, however that happened, was politicking, and I think that it's a shame to use that as a political football. So that's my statement. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ellen Whelan-Weiss. My daughter is in first grade at Cornwall. 2 reasons I think that making this amendment to the district charter makes sense. First, my understanding is that the vast majority of school districts in Vermont have already allowed towns that would be affected by school closure to have the authority, in addition to the school board, to vote in favor of that, or to have that authority. So it seems like we wouldn't be extraordinary or terribly uncommon if that's what ACSD decided to adopt. Secondly, I think there's a question of process. It seems clear there are people on the board who have an understanding of what the outcome needs to be of financial obligations and challenges facing our district. I don't have a problem with that. I think you misunderstand how much people will come along with you if they are genuinely invited into the conversation and into decision making. If you bring people to the table, and not in a performative way, but in a way that really tells them that this is important not just to your students in your town, but for all students, to what Peter said, if it's a good argument, we care about every kid and every family in every town. And we will show up as partners to you. We will listen, we will ask questions, we will inform the process in a meaningful way. And I genuinely think that this vote is your opportunity to change the conversation, to find a way to create partnerships and to break down opposition. And you can do that through process. This process has not felt transparent, it has not felt inclusive. But you have a chance to change that. So I really encourage you to think about that tonight. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take one more.
Awesome, lots of awesome comments. I just wanted to say, please stop thinking and saying this is about a few of us loving our small schools and not wanting certain schools to close, and that we only care about children in our respective towns. It's a complete mischaracterization of our beliefs, and even unintentionally veers towards condescension, and it makes it easy to dismiss our perspective. What I believe I'm fighting for is equity for every student in our entire community. True equity is fighting to keep a school in every town, because that is how we best provide education, connected to the community, close to home for our youngest learners, close to home supports, close to those who are struggling or distracted or marginalized. Schools far away are less equitable and more apt for children to fall through the cracks. However, importantly, I do not believe that there is never a time a school might need to be closed. It would be a really sad and hard decision, and it should be avoided. If it becomes truly necessary, it should be done carefully without political pressure and considering things that were left out of the prior conversations, such as geography, town size, and busing costs of all kinds. If I could write the article, I would start it. The goal of the district is to maintain all of our schools. However, in the situation, we are forced to consider closing or reconfiguring a school and then go on from there. I think our townspeople, as everybody has said, are smart, capable, and we all care about all children in the district. So we can make these decisions. The tension has always been between the desire to maintain town schools on one hand, or the desire to abolish or change that whole town school system. My voice to support the town school system is because it is best for all of our students. And please don't mischaracterize that.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it.
Victoria, maybe you can, you want to get on with the meeting, but just please note how many other people have come here with their children to speak out and make a comment also. If you don't have time for us, I appreciate that, but we hauled our children, out just to show you how important it is for all of us. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. All right.
How many more? I mean, can we
Could you
get a
raise
sense
a hand
of
of how many people didn't get to speak? There's
Just
one.
one.
Okay, thank you
Go
very
for it.
much.
Thank you.
First, I'm impressed by our community thoughtful comments. This just sorry. So okay, I'll just say what I was going. So my name's Saul Nurak. My wife and I, we live in Weybridge, and we have 2 kids at Weybridge Elementary School. I'm not here to focus on whether an individual school is closed or not. I'm here to promote a process to reaching an outcome that we can all live with. Many of us have followed the issue of school closure for years. To me, it kind of feels like a lingering cloud that just doesn't want to go away. And there hasn't been agreement from all sides. We all know school closure is a divisive issue within the larger community. Community is important. Like any healthy relationship, there has to be an acceptance from all sides, at least on the big issues. Forcing a decision within any relationship rarely ends in a productive outcome. My concern is that forcing a decision on a smaller town will exacerbate tensions. A couple of years back, Weybridge voted not to withdraw from ACSD when given the option. If there's a truly compelling reason to close a small town school, based on the facts presented by the board, I would hope that the wider community would put their trust in that town to make the right decision. If fostering trust and minimizing divisiveness between towns is a goal, and it should be, we need to allow ownership from those who will be most impacted. The way to achieve this is by letting each town have a say in its own fate. Only then can everyone accept and move on. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. On to the more exciting part of the evening. Is it Heather? Who am I doing?
Excellent. We're excited to see so many young faces in the room and to hear from the Cornwall School Group.
Did you want anyone to move on?
All right, my name is Mindy Harvey, or Miss Harvey, and I'm the 3rd grade teacher here at Cornwall. And thank you all for giving us some time to share about the 3rd graders' amazing adventures this fall. Heather asked me to share about community connections, which fit really well with our exploration this year. In our first unit, under the theme of who we are, we explored the central idea that communities are formed around civic virtues, which suddenly feels really relevant tonight. So I'll start by just talking a little bit about one of my favorite parts of the unit, and then I'm going to turn it over to the kids. The civic virtues or learning virtues that we explored were the IB learner profile traits, as well as some of the values that the kids chose for themselves. And one way that we explored being knowledgeable and open-minded was to think about our own identities. And we created identity flowers where we read about and talked about the ways that we define family, race, gender, spirituality, neighborhood, school, ability, and we shared those traits about ourselves with each other. And it just led to some really incredible open-minded conversations among these kiddos. This is Graham. Yeah.
picture is of Snake Mountain. It was really fun. We learned about seeds, and when we came back, we drew a picture of this valley down here. There was a wind cave somewhere over here, and someone else ate lunch there.
This is Hazel.
When we went to the knoll, we got to go on a tan. We walked up and down it and got to make forts. This one was called Hazard's Hut, and it's the same one there. And Normandy, Margaret, and I made one that looked like the roof of a house, and it was on a branch sticking out from a tree. We got to make windows too. And here at the nursing home, we made a bunch of amazing arts and crafts, and I painted a pumpkin. I loved hanging out with my great-grandma and doing crafts, and this gave me the same good feeling. It's different with elder folk than groupies, because they don't care about your grades or how you can do better. They care about having you do better.
All right, this is Vaughn.
Hi, I'm Vaughn, and I'm also doing about Snake Mountain. I didn't really choose to do about the seeds because he did a lot about it. It was very windy up there, and on the way up, some of us were making like blacksmithery stuff. We took sharp stones, we smashed to carve pieces of wood, and it was very fun.
All right, Deacon, we're up. This is Deacon.
My name is Deacon, and this is Daniel. At the mall, we planted mustard seeds, and it was really fun. And we pulled weeds and planted lettuce and leeks, and we pulled tomatoes. Margaret. I'm Margaret, and well, in this first picture, with the fossils, one time an anthropologist came, and his name was Mike Sheridan, and he brought ancient fossils of skulls and artifacts, which are fossils. And some of the skulls had been shattered and put together, because the dudes shattered their skulls. And they looked really weird because they were put together. And it was really fun. And in this picture, we're at Phi Hall, having a lesson from Will Amadon. It was actually kind of a real college lesson. And we learned about different types of rock, and the rocks we learned about were sedimentary rocks, metamorphic rocks, and igneous rocks. And another day when we went to Phi Hall, we went to another building on campus, and there were fossils in the walls of it. And we had fun spotting fossils, and it was really fun.
All right, this is James.
Okay. So mine is this one's about Snake Mountain. So at Snake Mountain, Yeah, we kind of, I would say blacksmiths, because we have like fire like hammers, but we didn't do horseshoes, but we would get a rock and go, yes, like something, I think Star Wars made Airheads one, like a bark, was it like the face bark? Facial expression mark. Did we do like a step or something? And step number 2, we pretended that we had like pet dinosaurs. We also ate pomegranate, whatever they're called, seeds. And like we looked at the valley and stuff. In this picture, oh yeah, sorry, Grandma, I'm kind of different. So in this picture, he's my dear friend. It's a grasshopper that was with me for like most of the day. But lost him at mall, which is sad. First he had his leg like this over his thing, and then in the car somehow, and I looked at it again, it was hanging high. So I just like, I was like, okay, man, bummer. It eventually fell off. In this picture, he has no leg, which is so sad. Wearing the same sweatshirt. And in this picture, we're guarding fans. That's a FedEx. That's someone. That's Dorothy, that's Juan, Isa looks like right here. And we're like at the library.
Town hall.
Town hall. We didn't buy books, which is alright. And like read that's okay.
Yeah. Delphina really sadly couldn't be here, so Hazel's gonna bravely take over from her. Do you have her card? Okay, great.
Okay, we were at the nursing home, and on the first week we made trees with leaf prints and leaf crowns. I liked being with the elderly because they cared about you and understood you. We were also at the Cornwall Town Hall. I was sorting books with Normandy. Taking them away, it was fun.
Dorothy?
So I here at the town hall, gardening we used some soil to plant, and over here there's mom down here. I forget what these are called. This is Miss Homie, James, me, Vaughn, and what that is.
Local volunteer. Okay, just stay up because you have that too.
Okay, so over here we were given whatever these are, we're like cutting them. Radishes. Over here we were reading, and this is called quackgrass. We were doing this thing where it was a competition, and whoever got the biggest one won.
And Normandy is also not here today, but she has pictures of some similar things. And I just wanted to end by saying a big thank you to all our community partners, especially Megan Brakely at the Knoll, which is the college organic farm, because she worked with us every week for the first 6 weeks of school, which is a pretty amazing investment of her time and ours. Thank you all.
Thank you, Cornwallians. We appreciate your presentation. You all did very well standing up in front of a big crowd. That takes a lot of bravery. Does anyone on the board have any questions for our students? Their presentation or for their teacher? I had one question about the grass at the end. What was the name of the grass?
Whack grass.
Do you want to explain why you call it
Whack grass?
I don't know why it's called. It's called black grass. Dorothy found this out at Mole. I can never do it. I only did it like once because if you put the grass in between your thumbs and blow, it makes it quack.
I know how to do
Yes,
that.
I
never
remember
knew what it
doing
was called. I didn't know there was a name. Excellent. Oh, well, you've taught me something today. Thank you. Anyone else? Great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Great job.
All right, minutes. Can I get a recommendation to approve the minutes of October 24th? Jen, thank you. Any questions, comments?
Second.
Oh, second on approving the minutes. Don't all jump at once.
You need a second? I'll second.
Thank you, Suzanne. Woo-hoo! Any questions or comments on the minutes of October 24th? Seeing none?
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Bienvenue.
Yeah, there was just one little point under section C that I had made a comment and we were going to add a link in the minutes.
Yes.
And it's not there.
It's not there. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Sorry.
No, thank you.
Sorry. I was trying to get some
No,
charge
no,
on my
sorry.
battery.
No, sorry. I'm glad you pointed it out.
Okay, other than that, Jen.
In public comment, I think it's Matt Cox. Is there really a Bill Cox too? In that folks?
I don't think so.
Comments?
Yeah, I think I got that wrong.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just might want to check.
Anyone else? All right, then with those two changes, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, minutes are approved. On to the bills. Dr. Malcolm.
There's two sets of bills. The group from the 31st of October, I believe, Barbara, you read those before you went away and just came back? Immediately? Just came back? The first is for the general fund of $326,908.90. The second are payroll-related $1,814.40, $1,310.91, and payroll of $871,838.20. Those were read on the 31st of October.
Chip, I'm sorry. Can you read the second one?
I'll give them.
Okay.
I'll just give them to you. Today, I read the bills. I don't know if they got read by anybody else. Apparently not. So what I would like to do is read them and then approve them, having read them, if somebody else can read them, hopefully tomorrow or at some point.
I could do it tomorrow.
Okay, that would be great. I know you weren't here, but I tried to solicit some others, but it couldn't happen. So those that were read today from the general fund was $792,366.54. And then the payroll-related one for $267.89. Like that one. One for $807.70, and one for $8,164.95. But then there was a $1,289,685.29 for payroll. Sometimes they're inflated depending on when the benefits have to be paid. So.
And you didn't like that one.
I didn't like that one. I liked the 200 or whatever, yeah. But in any case, I would approve the bills with the contingency that if Barbara can read today's bills tomorrow, and has no problem, we would approve them.
Great. All those, or any questions for finance?
We need a second.
Or can I get a second to approve those?
Second.
Mary? Any questions for the finance team? Nope, seeing none. All those in favor of paying the bills, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Bills can be paid. Thank you, Chip. So you all, I assume, have read through board pack and seen the professional appointments. If I could get a motion to approve the professional appointments as stated.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Barb. And a second, Mary. Any questions on this?
I have one.
Yes.
So there was 2 resignations. Did you elaborate, do we know why they resigned or have any feel for why they resigned?
Yeah, I mean, I know each candidate and why, but it's somewhat of a personnel matter, so
Okay.
I don't think that would be a public.
Okay.
Any other questions on this? Lindsay?
Do we also get notified of part-time positions such as coaches? I've seen quite a few postings in the local paper for different coaches in the district, but I don't think I've seen them on here.
Yeah, these are for license, so the policy states licensed
Okay.
positions, so you won't see paraprofessionals on here either.
Okay, all right. I was just wondering about the other ones. Okay, that makes sense.
Any other questions? Comments? Great. All those in favor of approving the professional appointments as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Professional appointments have been approved.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Yes.
We are simply acknowledging this, or we are approving these appointments?
It doesn't appear to be an action item in board pack is what we're trying to.
Yeah, we've always had this in here, just like with the bills, which
I
is
understand,
stated
but
action, but it's an action.
I'm trying to be, to be very precise about what we're doing, because members of the community have been quite vocal about whether an item is an action item or a discussion item. And I see that this is listed as a discussion item.
It's not listed as discussion, it's just listed as professional appointments, not discussion.
Okay.
So, but we do take action on it because we have to approve it. We have to approve.
Okay.
Where we say approve ACSD bills, we might want to say approve professional
Approve,
appointments
yep.
moving forward.
We can
Yep,
change that. sure.
duly noted. Yep, that's a good idea.
Good catch.
Thank you.
This is how it's been, since we've added to the agenda, it's been this same way, so.
I clearly haven't paid that much attention to it until this moment, and just wanted to make sure that it didn't look like it was an action item on the agenda.
Yep.
Can I just ask one clarifying question on that?
Yes, you can.
If in fact our job is to hire the superintendent and he hires and fires the personnel, then this seems to be in a weird sort of this place, okay? I've understood why we would want to know these issues, but as far as an action item, just to clarify that further, I know.
So this is part of what the board's role actually is statutorily, to approve licensed positions, so.
It's in our policy as our role of a board.
Well, that's fine, I just,
But you're right, it's really.
It was a little cloudy, okay?
Yeah, it's really the approval of his hiring, firing, or whatnot. We are not.
So that's
obviously
clear,
making-
okay,
interviewing
because
or
we are
making
not the
those
one who
decisions.
is hiring
No.
or firing people. Superintendent is doing that under our direction or
You're approving.
approving your actions.
You're the final approval in that
Right.
process.
That's good.
And it's a state law.
I understand that, but, and it's pretty different if it's a school of, 100 people
Oh, I know.
with one principal on one board. This is a very different
Yep.
situation. So just to make it clear, I thought that was true, but I also think it's a little murky. Okay, sorry.
No, no worries. Thank you. All right, on to the report of the superintendent.
All right.
It's all you.
All right. Well, we've got a lot on the docket tonight, so I was just going to actually move to start with the update on budget development. We met with the Finance Committee last week and are starting to bring the numbers together. Matt, who is in the audience, is going to talk a little bit about the notes that he's provided the board from that meeting. Essentially, just to kind of give an overview of where we are in the process, where I think Matt's doing, I've mentioned this a couple times, but I'll mention it again, he's doing an incredible job of kind of looking back over the years at the way that the budget has been developed and really trying to get to as transparent of a presentation of the information as possible. We are, as you all know, and we've talked about this a number of times in regards to staffing and other impacts on school districts across Vermont, inflation is going to have an impact, we feel like, as we look at this budget and move forward. A lot of that in this budget, because we're not in a negotiating year, is going to be on the non-staffing, so that's about 20% of the budget, which we think will have to expand a bit to respond to all the increased costs that we're seeing across the board. We will begin negotiations next year, so at this time next year, we'll be having to probably make a guess about where we think negotiations will land as we build in for FY25, what that looks like. So that's a kind of like a big looming, both that potential increase, the sunsetting of all of our ESSER funds, and the implementation, the phased implementation of the new weights that will begin. So we've got a number of things that we're kind of looking forward to in FY25. FY24 really is kind of the last year where we feel like things are kind of stay the same, and we think we're entering into a more dynamic period in a year. So do you want to share a little bit about?
Sure. Thank you, Peter. So yeah, just to recap a little bit of what we talked about at the last Finance Committee meeting. We are looking at several budget drivers, both on the personnel and non-personnel side of things. Some of the highlights on the personnel side are our mandatory health insurance increase across the board, which has come in at about 12.5%. So applying that to all the personnel and seeing what that does to the budget has been one of the primary construction zones so far. And then on the non-personnel side of things, as Peter alluded to, looking at what inflation's going to do to the things that we're buying and using in the schools. So we've split the non-personnel category budget lines into 3 categories. The first is not going to be subject to any inflation adjustment. The second one, which we can call energy, are things like gas and oil and electricity, where we don't really have a choice in who we're going to be using as a vendor or provider for those categories. And so those are going to be subject to a 5% inflation increase. Things that have a little bit more discretion but are nevertheless subject to inflation, like books and periodicals and general supplies, are all going to be tagged with a 4% increase. Both the 5 and the 4% are a little bit lower than where we are at right now, but these were picked because they reflect sort of the average of things cresting in the last quarter and starting to fall and settle as we get into the middle of next year. So it should be a pretty accurate, hopefully, picture of the swell and recession that we're going to see in the prices of things over the next 12 to 14 months. Other than that, we are looking at how to kind of clean up the budget. There are a lot of vestiges of old budgeting strategies in there, so cleaning things up, making them crystal clear and able to be presented in a way that makes sense to people, because if you can't understand what you're looking at, it's a very useful document. So putting a lot of work into that. And I think with all that told, very early on right now, but we're looking to project a budget increase of 5 to 7%. Probably closer to 7% all told for this year. But again, that's super early on, super broad strokes, and there's a lot of fine tuning that's going to happen in the next 2 to 4 weeks to sharpen that number up a little bit.
I have a question. Yes, okay. I would like to know how fuel is purchased for the district, heating fuel. Is it done on a budget plan, each month X number of dollars, or is it purchased all at once where you might get a pretty decent discount?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the precedent is. I'm pretty sure we do some pre-buying in order to lock in rates.
Bruce can speak to that.
And Bruce,
Yeah. We go through a bid process where we solicit bids from our fuel suppliers, and then the board actually approves the winning bid. So we took the low bid this year, and we get a locked-in price for fuel. So we're locked in. What we pay today is what we'll pay throughout the winter, and then we just call when we need fuel.
I guess my question is, do you pay all at once for the entire year?
No.
Okay, because I was thinking you might get a bigger discount for doing that. But
No, pre-buy. They offer a pre-buy number. I'm trying to remember what the differential was. It was a few cents cheaper to pre-buy. I don't know what that does to us as far as cash flow goes as a district. If you were to pre-buy, $1 million worth of fuel.
exactly.
We are encumbering the fuel budget this year so that it's a little bit more scheduled and laid out, and we can study it a little bit closer.
I would think for $1 million you might be able to get a more than a few cents discount.
Maybe.
Yeah, do you want me to keep going?
Keep going. Unless, does anybody have questions for Matt? Any other questions? Thank you.
Great.
I have a comment. Matt, because Steve and I were there, Barbara was away, the three of us that are on the finance committee, and Matt's, as Peter said, developed a pretty good picture of this very quickly. And so I congratulate him on that. I think, having fresh eyes on these different thousands of lines is always a good idea too, because trying to explain it to himself and then come up and put these things together is probably difficult for a new business manager, but it's also, I think, benefit to us to have that sort of perspective on looking at it. So I think I was impressed with that, and I look forward to seeing as it goes out. I'm sorry.
Steve?
I would echo Chip's comments. I've been very impressed with how well Matt has stepped in and taken over a problematic situation, and has been very good at clearly and concisely communicating what's going on in a very short time.
Thank you.
I actually do have a really quick question. Following along with your bullets, and most of them have another sub-bullet that has a little bit more, like, just detail about it.
Just the budget drivers?
Yes, the budget drivers. Principals meeting, is that really around staffing?
Largely confirming staffing, making sure that folks who are shared across different schools, we have a really clear understanding of which FTEs are assigned to which schools. Staff that are shared across different funding sources, making sure that we know the percentage that comes from general fund versus grant funding.
And just looking ahead at enrollment, so trying to get a sense of what the staffing needs, like teachers and support staff and other positions. So there's sometimes some flex there. So it's kind of like hearing directly from the principals and having a conversation around how's budget working now with your current students in the school, and what more might you need, are there any reductions that might need to happen, so looking at all those things.
Lindsay.
I have a general question about the superintendent's report. We get wonderful information from staff, and sometimes they'll say, oh, we'll share this with you. Where do I go to find those things? Because I kind of, in my mind, I think, oh, I'll get an email or something, but Where do I find those documents? Do they get linked someplace, or like last meeting, this isn't specifically with the budget, but with the superintendent's report in general. There was some great PowerPoints that I want to look at more closely. Is there where do we find those when someone says, oh, we'll give you access to this? Like,
So oftentimes after a presentation, Heather will upload that to meeting materials. I know John Flowers wanted access to one, was it a month ago, maybe?
2 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago. And I think that was uploaded afterwards to the website, so that's generally what we do with presentations.
okay, so go to the website and look for it
Under
within
board, yeah, under board and community, if you drop down to the specific meeting.
Okay, and then it'll be added on the, okay, not board pack, all right.
If not before, I mean, a lot of times it'll be like in the meeting materials.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need permissions, like the busing one, like I just clicked on it and you need permission, but some of them you need permission and I ask for it, but then I, forget about looking at it again, so.
But you were just asking about presentations, not...
Yeah, to go back and access them, so I'll explore the
We can
website
probably
a
get
little
this Cornwall one up today, too.
bit. That was really
That would be
cute, I
good
like
too,
that.
You are good to go on the list.
Okay, the next topic under my report is kitchen public bid opening. I note this as discussion, but Bruce, you need action on this?
Yes.
Okay, so that should say action. I think it's fine to change it on the spot. It's going to be just an opening of the bids and a board approving one pending your review. Is that correct?
Correct.
Steve has a question.
The document in board pack doesn't have any numbers in it.
Yes.
No, he's opening them right now.
Yeah.
This is a grand reveal.
Steve, I did the same thing. I said, Bruce, what am I missing? I don't have any numbers. She's like, that's what a closed bid is. I'm like, oh yeah, we use that term all the time. I didn't know it was going to be the big reveal.
The actual...
Can you talk through the process, Bruce, and just start to finish?
Okay. So we are using a construction manager format for the kitchen project. And what that means is we are...
At the high school, right?
At the high school, yeah. This is the kitchen project at the high school that earlier this year you moved money to have available to do this project. We have taken a set of plans developed through a survey we did and talking to staff and working with our architect and estimated what we thought it would be, sent it out to, we actually publicly advertised for companies, construction manager type companies to bid on it. And so we took all the companies that responded and pre-qualified them, and that's what 2 meetings ago?
Yeah.
You approved that list of pre-qualified bidders.
Yep.
Out of that list of pre-qualified bidders, we had 3 who are actually bidding their services, and that's what's in these envelopes tonight. And so their services and the numbers that are in here represent a management fee that they're going to charge to do the project. Design work that still needs to happen prior to the project taking place. And I think they're actually listed on that page in your board pack. So there's like 4 categories.
Yep.
So those 4 different prices are on here, and there should be a tally in each one of these. So I can just have a number at the bottom, and those numbers represent what our construction manager is going to charge to manage the project. They will, so construction manager hires all the subs that are responsible for the subs. So we won't know the actual, total dollar amount of this project until we get through the design phase and have it bid out by all of their subs. So sometime after the new year, we'll come back and report out what the project has actually come in at for cost, based on actual, bids from subs and tabulated by the construction management company. But tonight, we're approving the low bid, apparent low bidder for these services. And so I have 3 companies that responded: is Breadloaf, Reart Company, and Russell Construction. So, if you have any questions? Shall we proceed?
A drum roll, please.
Okay. This is fun. So I'll start with Breadloaf.
I've never seen this done this way.
I know.
We haven't had a big project like this in.
Yeah, we haven't done a big project like this, and this is a little different format. Not a lot of school construction has happened this way in the past, but it's becoming more, more popular. It seems to be a way to, you get a little more involvement in the design of the project. Instead of putting out a project completely designed and then having to pull back and say, oh, it's going to cost so much more, you can kind of design, as you look at it, you can design out really expensive items, or if you find that you have ample budget, you could add something in that you didn't have. So it gives you a lot more flexibility in what you end up with, because the construction company is involved in some of the design. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I just meant the public opening.
Oh, the public opening. Yeah, that's, I checked with the AOE and they said this is the way we need to do it for construction management services.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the anticipation is killing us.
Oh, okay. All right, so make sure I'm on the right line.
Can you open them all and just tell us who the winner is?
Yeah. We can do that.
No, I just think that's...
is that easier?
Well, I don't know if it's easier, I just think it's sort of...
Okay, I just want to make sure.
I'd also be interested
so
in
on
the
the front
variations.
page, yep, so in the form that we gave them, under, so total CM cost calculation, it's added up, and the total for Breadloaf is $147,494.00.
Okay, that's for the management.
Okay, yes, yeah, the management. Next, I will open Reart Company.
Just continue.
So we're only filling in line.
Does he have the other numbers or not?
Yeah, he does.
These are the numbers for the management.
Yeah, but he has all the other numbers too, right?
No,
No,
I don't know what the other numbers are.
They have to work with them to come up with that.
Okay. Reart Company's total for management of the construction project would be $251,435.00.
Wow.
Easy choice so far.
Yeah, next up, Russell. Okay, and Russell's proposed price would be $286,000. $286,840.00.
Wow, what a discrepancy.
So wait, Breadloaf was 1.4?
147.
147.
Significantly
Huh.
less.
So almost
That's
half.
why we say
That's
we
like
would, we're approving low bidder, apparent low bidder. That's why we say that, because we need to go back and check and make sure there's not some mistake somewhere.
Yeah, okay.
And
They forgot half of it or something.
Yeah.
So Ruth, if there was an issue, would you then need to come back, or would the next low bidder?
Right.
we would have to go with the next low bid if there's an issue. Yeah. And that's how the law describes what we need to do.
All right.
Yep.
So what we need is a motion. So if I could get a motion to accept the apparent low bid for construction management services from Breadloaf Construction in the amount of 47,000.
494.
494, contingent upon a review of the bids for completeness and accuracy.
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Steve got it? Yeah. Any questions, comments? Lindsay?
So, we're only learning about the construction management fee, and could the other fees be, how many millions of dollars is this, like $2 million or something? So, like the total project?
So the total project we thought would be around $2.5 million.
So it's such a small part of it. Do we have any sense of how the rest of the spending will go? Do they give a glimpse of what they're projecting at all?
Well, we took the original scope of what we were thinking would take place for the project. I say the architect and myself, and we had it priced out by a professional bidding company, and that number came back at $4 million. So I've been working with the architect to pare down whatever we could. However, that bidding company just does it based on construction numbers, current construction numbers, and a lot of it is, price per square foot construction. We'll get a much more accurate bid price when we work with our construction management company, because they'll be using local contractors and suppliers and to bid out the scope.
Am I right, Lindsay, that what you are saying is we're choosing the lowest bid, which was substantially lower, but they'll come back having won the bid, and then it will end up being a much bigger project than we thought. Is that my understanding of what you're saying?
Yes.
Or questioning?
Well, so like with Rearch and Russell being over $100,000 more, that's small compared to the overall scope of the projects. I guess it's conceivable that if we played it out, might one of the other two, I know we have to get the low bid, but it's just such a small percentage of the project, and I'm concerned with what we heard with it's going to cost double what we set aside. What is the process or timeline for, if it really is going to be $4 million, there's only so much you can cut out of it. Where does the other $2 million come from? Or what if we say, okay, Breadloaf's the low bidder, and they come back and say, actually, it's going to be $6 million. Then what? Do we pause the whole project? But once we're committed to this construction management, do we have to move forward, even if they come back with a number that's going to require us to ask for a bond or something?
No, they can't hold you to, they're bidding these numbers based on, we told them we think it's going to be a $2 million project. So these responses are all based on the same scope that we thought was going to be a $2 million project. They can't change the scope without our approval.
Right. Okay.
But if the scope is the same, like the actual physical work is the same, but the cost is higher because of the cost of building materials.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
then we pare the scope back, and I've already begun to do that.
Okay. So are we do you foresee us having to come up with a significant amount of additional money to be able to bring this project to completion? How much can you pare it back, from $4 million?
Right. It's hard to tell because I'm working off of this estimate that we got from an independent company.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already found differences between what they plug in for numbers and estimates, and then just talking to local contractors that I work with who are coming back and saying, oh no, we could do it for 30% less than what that number is.
Yeah, so maybe there's a little confusion. So this is just the management piece. So how does the rest of the work get bid? Is there a bid process for the rest of the work?
So the rest of the work will be, you're approving this bid because the construction management company is taking responsibility for the cost of the project, in that they have to go get all of their subcontractors together and come up with a total price. And we've told them that the project,
Not to exceed.
we're anticipating a $2 million project, and that's how they develop these. And so if they come back and say, we can't do it for $2 million, then we're going to start paring down the scope of the project.
Okay.
And if we get to a point where we can't do the project because it would just cut too much out, then we would have to revisit, what we're going to do. I don't anticipate we'll end up doing that.
Any other questions for Bruce?
I have a question. So the amount that's here, once we agree to this agreement, we pay Breadloaf to do the management piece of it?
Yeah.
Okay, we're bound by this, okay.
Yeah, we're bound by this to hire Breadloaf. We're bound for that quantity of money that we approved tonight.
For their management?
For their management.
Okay, but if we don't like what they come back at, that money's gone?
Yeah, I mean, if we say, if we don't, that money's gone. We've hired them to do this piece. But if they get to January and say it's going to be $6 million, we can say, we don't want to move forward. We'd be out this money, but we wouldn't be committed to pay $6 million.
We've worked with Breadloaf before, so we have good reputation. They have a good reputation.
They have a good reputation. They're a local company. Yeah.
Okay.
Where are the other companies based out of?
So REARC is out of Williston, Vermont, and Russell, I believe, is in Rutland. I should say on here.
And Bruce, just by looking at the numbers for these management estimates, I mean, can you think of anything just off the top of your head about why there's a $100,000 difference between Breadloaf and the other, at least a $100,000 difference between Breadloaf and the others?
Nope. I'm baffled.
That's huge. So huge. That's huge.
That's why we want to review.
And then based on, I mean, I don't know if you were involved with the last time the district worked with Breadloaf, but was that process forthcoming with their, there was no like bait and switch?
No.
Do you have any idea?
No, I mean, we checked references on Breadloaf, and everything's been great. We talked to some folks at the college that work with Breadloaf. They were pre-qualified, so they made the pre-qualification list.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, one last question. So if we award this, we're out this amount of money, even if they end up not managing it? It seems to me.
Well, if we're out, we're hiring them as our construction manager. We'd have to get, probably some legal advice at some point if we get to the point where we're saying, okay, we're not going to move forward with the project. So I can't tell you.
Okay, because that seemed a little bizarre to me, that we would be out the whole amount if in fact.
I think that's, if we ever have to cross that bridge,
right, okay,
it would be
cool.
Legal counsel who would tell us what.
It seems like the contract between them and us should, I used to work on contracts, would have that specified?
I believe it does. I mean, these are all AIA documents.
Yeah, so I would imagine it would have those terms in there, I would hope.
Yeah, there's about 700 pages.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there are.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Any other questions, or can we move forward with? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as stated, thank you. Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Bruce, you have a construction manager, project manager. You done?
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. All right, on to the report of the board. to start, last meeting, there was some confusion around the motion that was on the table, how it was worded, and the order in which the decisions should be made. I'm going to ask Mary Heather to rescind her motion so that we can have a full discussion and everyone can share their opinion about Article 14. Since we do not have a full board present tonight, I'm going to hold off on asking the board to take action tonight. Instead, I'd like to hear from each of you and end with agreement around the motion we would like to bring to the table at a future meeting.
Point of order, do we have a quorum or not?
We do have a quorum. But I feel like this is a vote that's obviously very important to a lot of people. And I feel like leaving the last meeting, people felt like we were hurried and that every voice, all the voices of the board hadn't been heard. And so I feel like we take the vote off the table today. One, also because we don't have a full board here. It will allow us to have sort of a more open conversation and have everybody really be able to consider options.
Question.
Yes.
Don't you have to vote to take it off the table?
Yes, we're going to get to
Okay.
that. Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Yes. I believe so. So that's how I'd like to proceed. Hoping that at the end of this discussion that we'll be able to have agreement around sort of the wording of the motion to bring to the table at a later meeting.
And then did you want to say anything about whether or not it will be on the next meeting or? Okay. Okay, so,
so if you'd like to.
So do we, just like a point of order, do we make, have you made the motion to rescind it?
No,
Or
so
does
Mary
somebody make a
Heather-
motion
I have to do
to?
it because I was the person.
Yeah, so Mary Heather's going to make a
Okay.
motion.
And then
Okay.
I believe do we have to vote to rescind? Or do I just rescind? This is a specific Robert's rule.
Right.
It's a public,
Yeah, the only time is if the motion is on the floor right now, then Mary Heather no longer owns it. And so then I think there would have to be a motion to postpone.
Well, we did that at the last meeting.
I know that.
So we're not postponing it, we're withdrawing it so that we can regroup and come up with a
Okay, yeah,
motion.
so it's kind of a weird kind
It
of
is
sequence,
weird,
yeah.
But I think there was so much confusion.
No, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that part's weird, I'm just, the point of order,
Yeah.
yeah.
So either you can make a motion to rescind or one of us can make a motion to take it off the table.
That I'm not sure about.
No, I think Mary Heather would
Okay.
rescind. Taking off the table, I think, because we're just delaying it.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, does anybody else have any questions before I? Okay. So yeah, I mean, clearly after the last meeting, there was just a lot of confusion around the motion that was made and kind of the process to move forward on this issue. And so before I rescind, I just kind of want to explain why I made the motion that I did. So when we kind of initially talked about just the issue of Article 14 and whether or not to change it, and if so, how we each felt about it, and kind of went around the table. To me, it was clear that there was some support for possibly changing it under certain circumstances for some folks, and for others, there was support to change it, definitely. I was one of those people who felt that I would prefer not to change it unless it was specifically to allow for a district vote. And so I put forward a motion with that specificity, because it seemed to me that if we put forward a motion that just said we want to change it without specificity, then folks like myself would probably vote no on that. And if it didn't move forward, then there's no opportunity for it to move forward with specificity. Does that make sense? So that's why I put forward the motion that I did, because it seemed to me that we should have a vote on either changing it for a district vote or changing it for a town vote, because those were the two options that were kind of being discussed. And it didn't make sense to me to just put forward a motion that said, do we want to change it, and just kind of leave that out there to be decided later. That just didn't seem thorough. So that's why I put forward the motion. I think given the timing of the evening and all the other material we had gone through, there was some confusion about that. So I just wanted to clarify that was my thinking. But obviously there's some discontent, and I think we need to just have an open conversation about it. And then the other thing I just want to point out before I rescind is, I think, you know, obviously, and just hearing people's public comments, first of all, I'm just heartened that we have such passion in our district for our schools and for education. But the thing that just keeps kind of needling me like a thorn in my side is that there is a sort of this issue, you know, kind of looming. I feel like there's a particular privilege that comes with showing up for this issue. And what I find bothersome a little bit is, you know, we don't have crowds like this when we're talking about things like the achievement gap in our district, or I don't know, other matters of, you know, social emotional needs and behavioral challenges in some of our schools. And, you know, this one issue seems to be the things that gets people out of their houses, in their cars, and in front of the board. And I feel like the work of the board is so much broader than that. I just want to make sure that as we continue to talk about this issue, that we're keeping in mind our full mission as a board, and who we're talking about when we're referring to we and us and education community. You know, there are issues that we should be working on that haven't been worked on because this keeps coming back. And I'm not saying that that's not an important thing. I'm just not sure it's the most important thing for all students. And, you know, that's just my own personal struggle with all this. I would like us to come together and find a resolution, and I hope that tonight we're able to figure out how we can craft a motion that makes sense to the board. But I really want everyone to be thinking about what's best for all students, and keeping in mind, you know, that our focus needs to be on the education of our students and the conditions for our educators. And I just want to remind everyone to put that at the forefront. So with that, I make a motion to rescind the motion that I made on October 24th about modifying Article 14 of our charter to provide for a district-wide vote prior to any school closure. And I think that's probably all I need to do. I think so. All right.
Okay, so the motion has been rescinded. So I think before we begin discussion, and I'd like to be able to hear from everybody sort of what they're thinking about, what they've been contemplating over the last 2 weeks around this Article 14. But I want to remind folks of our job as board members to a unified district. We're tasked with providing the best quality education we can and the best value to taxpayers that we can. We've debated and defined what a model school looks like with the input and expertise from the professionals who work in this district and have devoted their careers to the education sector and studying, thinking about, and puzzling over how to create schools and classrooms where students thrive and teachers have what they need to educate all kids. We talked about classrooms with natural light, access to out of doors, single grade classrooms, a building where all staff are full-time equivalents to ease community building, collaboration among staff, and access to services for students who need them. These are the basics of providing both quality and value. But we aren't here tonight to argue about whether we should close any of our schools or not, but rather, if the time comes, who should bear the responsibility of that decision. Currently, the responsibility lies with the board and a supermajority vote. Thanks to the ad hoc committee's work, we've seen in detail how other districts make these decisions. Some are similar to ours, others allow for a town vote, and still others a district vote. Those who worked on our articles of agreement, including Suzanne, Ruth Hardy, and others, considered the unique makeup of our district and the responsibility of the newly forming board. They worked for months considering the options. When I look at what they created and how it is standing the test of time, I have to say it's working. Our very own little piece of democracy is messy business, but it is doing what those who created it intended. They intended for the supermajority vote of the board to require a very high burden of proof to close a school. If we tried today to close a school, I would guess that it wouldn't pass by supermajority. The argument hasn't been made strongly enough, and the cost of not tightening our belts in preparation for financial difficulty has not yet been felt. What I would say is that our current structure, although it works, has caused the board to struggle with allocating enough time to the work of improving the district, and puts us in jeopardy of politicizing board positions. For these reasons, if we were to change Article 14, I would support a compromise and a change that includes a district vote. So with that, I would love to hear from each of you what you're thinking, with the end goal of this evening being a motion that we all accept as the best thing to put forward when we do vote.
I'll start it off.
Great, thank you.
I would vote basically no in either of those two situations. And I would vote no because of the word specificity that was mentioned. And I do not feel that the specificity is there. By that, what criteria are you going to be using, either as a district, a board, or a town, to make a decision? You just can't vote and say, okay, these people will make the decision. You have to have the criteria that everybody agrees on, and then you look at the schools, and then you make your decision. I would change it completely, and I would say we should be voting on the criterion to keeping a school open, not closed. See if it fits all the things that education requires of a school. That's it.
Thank you.
I'll go next. Actually, I've given this a lot of thought over the last couple of weeks. And, you know, first of all, I believe that this is far too important of a decision for us to make without spending some more time assessing and really discussing the merits of all the changes, all the choices we have in front of us, right? All we've done at this point is did research on what has other districts done. And yes, there's a variety of things that other districts have done, including similar to ours. But we haven't then, as a board, discussed, okay, in the case of Addison Central School District, we're separate, we're different, we have our own unique characteristics. Let's look at each of the different flavors of changes that are out there and see and talk about, well, how would this work? How would this work? And maybe with caveats, you know, I might even agree to a district-wide vote, right? But we are not spending that time. To me, it's premature to even go down one path, because I think if we all really sat down and discussed what the 3 options or 4 options might be, we actually may be closer together than far apart. And so today, trying to come up with that language, I think it's going to be really hard. I really think, that the ad hoc committee or another committee, it would have been good to really spend some additional time to really think through and present to the board, well, here are some options. Let's talk about it, as opposed to brainstorming it in this meeting and then at the end of the meeting, voting on it.
Yeah, I mean, and especially in saying this, that I don't want to superimpose this, I guess, is that what I'm trying to say is that I don't think that I, right, as a student, necessarily know all the ins and outs of, like, the politics that go into this and the decision-making that go into this, because it's a very complicated issue, the idea of whether a school closure in general, and it's a thing that a lot of people have very close to their hearts. But I am here to give a student opinion. And as a student who went to Weybridge Elementary School and who grew up in one of these very, very small communities, I have to say that, when you're talking about a school, it's a lot more than a school. Especially in Vermont, that school is the center point of a community. And it's what the community basically a lot of the time revolves around. And I think that it would be a real shame if the people in that community had no say about what happened to it. Because this is it's a very central part of a lot of people's lives, and just being part of that, and still, like, when, like, that community doesn't dissolve as children move out of, again, these smaller elementary schools. Like, I still know so many of the kids that go to Weybridge now because those are my neighbors, those are people I know very closely. And I think I would just say that, it would be it would be very sad to me personally if those people who feel that sense of community and who are really, really part of it have no ultimate say at all in what happens to that center point of a community.
Thank you. You want to keep going around, or? Anyone else? Sure.
All of us have thought about this a lot, and I've thought about this a lot since I decided to come back on the board after unification, after being with a lot of different issues many years ago. And reading that part of the supermajority as a school closure, I don't remember it tipping me one way or another as to how I was going to vote on these articles because I voted for it. But I still come back to the premise that we are a district. Act 46, with all its limitations, basically was meant, from what I can gather, was to drive schools to consolidate with incentive and for other reasons, for both efficiency and hopefully equity in learning, okay? That, of course, then conflicts with the town school type of situation that Vermont has had forever. As one letter writer wrote me, the reason there were so many schools in so many towns and eventually they came down to one school is because they efficiently couldn't support all these little schools scattered around, or they were too expensive, or there weren't enough kids to generate enough people in each of those in order to make them viable units. Now, that's a long time ago, obviously, but that's how it's evolved. And as we get to this point in time, I feel everybody's concern. But I still come back that there's no way to make every one of us perfectly comfortable with the absolute decision, other than having it be by a district-wide vote. I do think the district-wide vote does, as we vote on the big numbers of budgets, the district-wide vote, to me, makes the most sense to bring it out of the supermajority of the board. We've already seen board positions politicized. They've never been that way in this district or around Vermont very much in the past. It's happening across the country for different issues. But God help us if we get to that point that we're really politicized by who you are and what you bring to the table as far as your efforts to be on the board. So I feel it uncomfortable from the board having the total vote on something as big as a school closure. And I just feel that it's important to bring it to the district as a whole. To say that the people in the town do not have a vote in that, it's not really true. They have a vote in the district just like I would have a vote in the district on another issue, and that's equal, that vote. Yes, the numbers may be a little skewed by the nature of our towns and their sizes, but that's democracy, and I really dispute the folks that say it is undemocratic constantly by saying that it, in fact, if you brought this to a district-wide vote, that the majority town, Middlebury, would override that group. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true, and I would want to know, just as Brian is sort of pointing out, I don't agree with him that way as far as the detail, but I would be damn sure I am comfortable with closing someplace for all the reasons that we set up to do it. Now, we're not to that point. The time's different than it was 5 years ago when we started this whole process. So I feel pretty strongly that I would definitely side on a district-wide vote as the majority vote of all the voters in the district, not delegated by town, as, quote, the most democratic and fair, that's my opinion, way to do it. Barbara, I don't think we can argue this point. I just don't know how we get to the next step. You're not going to convince me differently by telling me that Bristol did it differently or some other school did it differently. We're the only ones that are having to face this right now. Bristol is, Virginia, it seems to be in this county, but other places, it will start to happen. Maybe not in Chittenden County, but it will happen because the finances are really a difficult part of this. And the equity issues too. So that's where I come down on it, and whatever.
I'm a little bit confused because I have 4 billion things to say. But on your last point, Chip, I mean, you said you're not going to change my mind on this or that. That's fine. I'm confused though, like what are we doing then? Like, we've collected all this data. Some of it's useful, some of it's not. If evidence doesn't matter to us, then why spend the time doing it? Like, I was actually surprised by some of the things in here that you guys, this committee found, which is great, but it raises a lot more questions than it answers. And like this report that you've done is useful, but it doesn't answer questions that we need answered. Like if you handed this report in a class, it wouldn't be that useful. 39 of the 46 districts have or have had town vote requirement. I don't know what percentage that is because I'm bad at math, but it's a lot. And that seems to not matter to a lot of people. We also heard from a million people over the last couple of weeks that they are afraid that a small town will, vote against the board trying to close a school and bankrupt the town or whatever, school district. And we have no idea how often that's happened in these towns that have had town vote things. Like, I would love it if someone found that out. Or there seems to be this kind of perpetual fear that we are afraid of small towns, any towns, having a right to help decide the future of its school. And yet that fear to me seems unfounded. And it seems like sort of a boogeyman lurking in this sort of specter, as if we live in some otherwise unpolluted democracy. And we spent also the last couple of months dealing with this equity stuff. People in a town who will lose a school are vastly disproportionately impacted by that decision. Therefore, any equity lens has to take into consideration that disproportionate impact. And the way to remedy that disproportionate impact is to give them a special say in that decision. So I guess I've just been shocked so much over the last meeting by how people seem to be so dug in and unwilling to really get into the details of things, and a rush to a vote. I know we pulled back from that, and I appreciate that. But again, the idea that in the next, however long this meeting lasts, that we will get to a language that we can vote on that understands the criteria by which we will close the school, with a full understanding of what these various three mechanisms are, I think it's irresponsible. And so my hope is that actually we look into these fears that people have, and we see if they're grounded, and we look into these other hopes that people have. And I'm the kind of person who's pretty swayed by evidence, personally. Evidence that is quantitative in nature, and the kind of evidence that Nargis is bringing, which actually is data. And I want us to do that. And I don't know whether that means kicking it back to the committee, forming another committee, which I'm sure nobody wants to be on. But we need to know more and be more careful with this decision.
Can I follow up on that?
Let's give everyone a chance to speak,
go
and then
Sure.
we'll go.
I just want to say I really appreciate when we took a pause last week and we did not vote on that, because I think the 2 or 3 weeks that we've had off have given all of us more time to think about things. And it's given our constituents time to contact us and give us their feelings on it. And so I appreciate that extra time. Mary Heather, you brought up some things that I've been thinking about as well, which is the school is more than the building. It's the teachers who make the research shows the best learning experience is having the best qualified teachers. Our teachers are at a tremendous amount of stress right now because of the fact that they can't hire enough teachers or enough paraprofessionals. They're pinch hitting all over the building during the day. Principals are not being able to spend the time doing what principals typically do because they're filling in, plugging in holes, etc. So the more schools we have open, the more people we have to, or more places we have to staff. And I think we lose out by moving teachers around, etc., and putting them under such strain. I think we really need to protect our teachers and try to keep them and to make the job more sustainable. The other piece is when we look at performance, last spring we got the strategic, and I know this is a year old, and I know COVID was part of the results here because the testing wasn't done. But when I look at the fact that only 50% of third graders and 58% of ninth graders can read with proficiency or a little bit above, there's a lot of kids who are not reading proficient. There's 60% that are not. That's a serious problem. that we're not talking about. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Math, in third grade, 44% of our kids are proficient in math. By ninth grade, 34% are proficient in math. That's pretty pathetic. We should be doing a much better job. We need to focus on stuff like that. The other thing I feel very strongly about is, and I know Hugh brought this up about the preschool, or somebody brought it up about the preschool. Oh, no, Mac brought this up about the Ripton preschool. We need more preschool spots for kids. If we want to prepare them to get more proficiency as they get up, we need to be getting these kids in school sooner, not closing preschool. So I think we have a lot to look at, and it isn't just the building itself. We need to really start putting our heads around how do we focus on better performance, helping our teachers to be the best that they can be, and making sure that we're including all of our children in our community. So I think we need more time too to figure out how this charter will go. I appreciate the woman from Weybridge said that we need the people who have the best knowledge. So I appreciate you saying that. We spend a lot of time on the board going through these things. And I know before I was on the board, I was a teacher. And I never paid attention to stuff like that. I just knew what I needed to do during the day, get in. It's a whole different game when you're really looking at running the school. So we need a lot more time to think about this and become really experts before we make a huge decision like that. Thank you.
I agree with Mary and what she said about the student outcomes. I'm worried that there is this idea that closing schools and consolidating is going to be the solution to that. And I just feel like some of those problems, those questions could be just exacerbated by that. And I just want to be careful that we're not, because we're struggling now, thinking that closing schools is going to be the solution. And I just wanted to piggyback on that. We're asking towns to potentially make a giant sacrifice, a big sacrifice for the better of the whole. And I just don't think that it's fair to ask a town and a community. I mean, this whole year has been about community. And we heard about community events in this third grade classroom and how it really enriched their lives. And that's community. It wasn't a specific, I mean, the teacher coordinated it and the principal coordinated it, but it was outside community that enriched, and that happens on all of our schools. I mean, I read about it because I get all the emails, a lot of emails. To cut that away, to cut that out, or to not celebrate that, or not honor it, and give it what it needs, is not right. I don't think. And I do want to clarify, just like for like housekeeping, is the idea that a town vote or a district-wide vote is in addition to the supermajority? Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
At least that's how I've been
you
thinking.
both nodded very vigorously, and you,
yeah.
I have a feeling like, so that was, I was unsure whether it would be changed in that way, so it's good to know it would be in addition to the supermajority. I mean, the district-wide vote could happen in another way too. Listening to what people had to say about the petition makes me wonder, if we're going to support a district-wide vote, why don't we ask the electorate if they want to change and how they want to change the charter? The last line in the open letter from Save Our Schools is, in addition, we are eager to engage in dialogue and collaborate with you, the board, on a potential revision to this article of agreement. We look forward to that opportunity with the ACSD board. Like, what, can we talk about it with people that want to engage with us? I'm curious about the petition, and I think it adds another dynamic to this conversation.
Yeah, or Suzanne, I can't see that far. Does Suzanne have her hand up yet?
There she is.
I was waiting for everyone in the room to go.
Okay.
All right,
Steve wants me to go before him. I mean, I don't have anything prepared. I've been doing football championships and volunteering at Moms and just, you know, like you had said, we all have very, very, very busy lives. And yes, we as board members spend an extra amount of time focusing on these issues, but we also have other lives. And to be honest, this is exhausting. Like, this whole thing is exhausting. And, you know, to come in and think that we're going to vote, and now we're like, oh, we might just talk about this until eternity again, because we do have other things to do, you know, and other items keep getting pushed. And so I know it's critically important to everybody that we get this right, and it's exhausting that we just keep having all of these conversations. I'm not really even sure where I sit right now on this. You know, I feel like it's a democracy, and I feel like we're a district, and that's the reality right now, is we're a district in a democracy, and we have to live within that or work to changing it. And if folks don't like the reality, then we need to fix it. But if we're in a district democracy, we have a charter right now that the voters agreed on, and if the voters are telling us they're not comfortable with that, even though we are the people who know the most about this issue and have studied it for 6 years, very carefully with all the data, and if they want us to expand that, that we don't just have all of that responsibility, to me the only way we can do that is for a district vote. I don't think we can do it as a town vote, and it's not because we fear, it's because it's a democracy, and we're all in this together.
Steve, do you have a comment?
Do you want me to go?
I don't know if you can hear me, and I'll try to let my voice carry through the waves.
We can hear you.
I'm currently in West Warwick, Rhode Island, not on a vacation. I'm receiving medical treatment, so just to let you know. It took us a long time to come up with the articles. We never, as a committee, really envisioned that there was ever going to be a time that if there was ever a need to close a school, that it would be a walk through the park to achieve the supermajority of the board in order to close a school. At the point that the articles were created, if you had asked for a supermajority of the board to vote at that point in time, you probably would never have made it. We all sat on pins and needles the night of the vote, not sure which way it would go. When the phone call came through that all the towns had voted to come together as one district and for representation to be that which oversaw the entire district, and no longer did we represent just our towns, but we represented all of the schools and all of the students across the district. We've heard from people that say that individual towns are the only ones that understand the issues within their towns. But we as school board members do our best to try to understand all of those issues as well as the town people. The other piece that I've heard is that the representation is not democratic. The representation on the board was set up based on the census data and trying to give equal representation across the towns. Yes, Middlebury has the most voters. Part of that is because Middlebury also happens to be home to Middlebury College, and there happens to be a law, a statute, whatever made in Washington, D.C. that gives those students the right to register and vote in the town in which they happen to reside for 6 months or more. That's not something we can change, and I think that even if you took out the students from Middlebury College, we would still find that Middlebury has the most in number of voters. The other piece that I want, and I feel that I need to bring up, is that there's a lot of people in this district that were not necessarily happy with the whole process of having to come together, and each town spent their own town budget dollars to allow Ripton to leave. And then as I keep getting reminded, as I walk the streets or run into taxpayers, that only Ripton was allowed the vote to rejoin our union. People are not necessarily happy about that. But are they coming forward and saying that? No, because lots of people are afraid. They know that this issue runs deep. It divides families, it divides friends. And I think that currently we have so much on our plate that to rush through this in 2 meetings may not be in the best interest of our district. And I think that we should go slow, move slow. Not that we're putting it off, but we want to make sure we get things right. And currently, we have not said that we are closing a school. We've talked about our facilities and how far our dollars can stretch, but we have yet to say we are closing school X, Y, or Z. So if we have to put things out on the table, I prefer to leave the charter article as it is and instead write a procedure as to what we are looking for should we need to close a school. What would make us say we need to close a school? What are those criteria? We have not done that. And when we did the charter 6 years ago, 7 years ago, we chose to leave it as an article and not to write those criteria because we didn't know where the district would be where we are now. But if that's not what everyone wants, the only way I currently could see us changing the charter is leaving the supermajority of the board, and then as we do all of our budgets and our representation, leave it to the entire district to vote. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Steve, do you want to speak, or does anyone have any additional comments?
This will not be popular. As we approach this issue tonight, I felt that in light of last meeting's remarks prepared by Member Doria, that a response to those issues and the issues being publicly discussed around this charter change was in order. Ms. Doria stated that we owe a debt of gratitude to the Ripton School Board, of which she is a member. I personally feel no gratitude to those members and the members of the Save Our Schools organization or the editorial position of the Addison Independent. Those groups have been singularly responsible for the division, distrust, acrimony, and confusion around the issue of school closure. 3 particular concepts come to mind as I frame these remarks. First is the issue of compromise. I will discuss what it takes to compromise and why we have not been able to reach that state on this issue. Second is the framework of language. Terms such as democracy, freedom, and liberty have been misused and used to inflame the discussion. Finally, I would like to talk about purpose, the purpose of the various groups that have come together on this issue. Compromise is a term often used by members of the groups mentioned above to accuse this board of being unwilling to meet halfway on the issue of school closure. I would ask where the compromise has been on the side of the self-appointed advocates of no school closure. They have adamantly refused to accept any article on school closure that does not give their town the absolute right to veto a school closure. They have said repeatedly that this board does not listen to what they say and will tell anyone that they are not being listened to when they comment. The board has listened. They have sought compromise. And time after time, when these advocates have not gotten exactly what they want, they say they are not being listened to. But in reality, when someone does not agree and rationally argues that your position does not work for many reasons, backed up by data and supported by legal opinion, they are listening. They are just not agreeing. Compromise has been a word misused by these groups as a cover for not getting their way. It is one of the many examples of misrepresented language coming from that side of the discussion. My second point has to do with the intentionally inflammatory language used by Save Our Schools and others. This board has been told to trust towns to make the right decision on school closure. Trust is important, they say, and we should willingly surrender our financial and educational quality charges to the towns that make up our district. This whole process shows that a few individuals can hijack that process to pursue their own agenda and should not be trusted. These powers were given to school boards by law to prevent the subversion of the education of all students by a small group pursuing the financial interests of the towns. The voters who elected us should be trusted. These individuals should not. And to trust someone, you need to know that they are being honest. Another term that has been recently used that I find ironic coming from some individuals. How honest is it that 2 members recently backed by Save Our Schools and editorials in the Addison Independent have violated campaign finance laws of this state in those elections? The Addison Independent roundly criticized Representative Becca Balin's failure to file reports in a timely fashion during the last election cycle. When Ms. Doria and Mr. McCallum did the same thing, there was complete silence. And to date, Save Our Schools has still not filed the appropriate paperwork for the March election. Millard Cox, the current president of Save Our Schools, repeatedly said that Ripton pays for its school. The State Board of Education found otherwise and was criticized again for making it too hard for Ripton rather than acknowledging that Ripton and other small schools do not, in fact, bring in enough tax revenue to support a school in their town. That money comes from larger tax bases like the one in Middlebury. I ask, are these the actions of honest people? Finally, I would like to close with some remarks on purpose. Look first at the purpose of Save Our Schools. Take them at their name. They exist to save the schools in their community, not to provide the best education for students across the district, not to provide a fair and equitable way to pay for education, not to provide the best working environment for educators and staff. They exist to keep open the school building in their community. What then is the charged purpose of the school board? I believe it is to effectively and efficiently educate all students under its charge. A Ripton resident and previous board member whom I highly respect recently wrote to me to express concerns about the charter change. That person said to remember that we are charged with this purpose and that the towns are irrelevant to that purpose. His words, not mine. Our unified board was created to look beyond the boundaries of towns and to try to educate all of our students. It prompted me to think on the tools we have been given to accomplish this charge. We submit a budget for the district to be voted on by the public, but we cannot tax. We may hire a superintendent to run daily operations, and we can oversee that person's performance. We may follow the recommendations of that superintendent to cut staff if he feels it will not damage the educational effectiveness. But we should not be cutting staff for budgetary purposes. It is not our job. One of the only powers that we do have as a school board is to decide what facilities we need or do not need to carry out our charge. I cannot and will not surrender that power to a group of self-selected champions of a cause that I do not support. This is not an easy stand to take. I expect it will make me a target of both these champions and Angelo Lynn. But I can only do what I believe the elected representatives in a representative democracy, not a direct democracy, should do. Carry out the charge of my office, even in the face of those threats, insults, and misrepresentations.
Thank you.
I'm next, I think. Yes, or unless you have somebody else.
Okay. I appreciate that this board was willing to pause because I've gotten a lot of really valuable information since our last meeting, and I'm trying to approach this with an open mind, with the best interests of all of our students in mind. And someone was saying, everyone's right. There's validity to all these points. And I'm just so grateful that we're taking, I feel for someone who's been on it for 6 years, like, going through this over and over again, it is exhausting. As I was preparing to come today, I was like nervous, like, oh my God, what's going to happen today? And it's like 6 years of that can really I'm just thinking like, man, how much more time is this going to take? But I would rather take the time than look back and regret that we didn't follow a process that we can be proud of. And I see a sincere effort on the part of everyone that we're trying to do our best. This is a volunteer board, and everyone has the best of intentions, and our minds are open, our ears are open. So as I was thinking about this, one of the things that I was on the policy committee last year. This is more than a policy. This is a foundational document of our district. So at the very minimum, my opinion, my perspective is that we should be giving this minimally the attention that we would give a policy. For example, a policy where we're simply adopting the exact language of the VSBA. I mean, we put a lot of time into this stuff, And so to put less time into a foundational document of our district just doesn't make sense to me. And we have such wonderful, thoughtful people who care so deeply on this board in our community. And I wish that this many people would show up when we were talking about achievement gaps, but I'm grateful that people are showing up. I was kind of sad coming on the school board and being like, where are all the people? There's no people here. Nobody's involved. It's just us at the table. And so it's really nice that people are coming out. About a year ago, I was looking for the exact date. We received a document from Ripton, and it was asking us to consider a charter change. And I remember being in the room and saying, well, do we have the power to do that? And the answer that I got was just a simple answer. No, it's the electorate. It was voted on by the district. And since then, we've had some legal counsel. I'm interested in seeing exactly what the legal counsel found, because there has been a shift. I could find the minutes or the recording from that meeting from my colleagues saying, making a charter change is beyond the power of the board to where we are now. There's been a process. So I'm interested in seeing what the legal counsel said and how we arrived at that. When I think about the fundamental questions, it seems pretty solid that the board will retain its supermajority voting power. And so the questions in my mind are town or district? And for those parties and for the board, supermajority or majority? If we look at the votes of the district and ask for, a supermajority from the town and just a majority from us? I don't know. I just don't know. But, these are some of the questions. And then binding versus non-binding, seeing some of these towns where they have a non-binding process, like, if we decide that, it's going to be a non-binding vote of the town, is that really any better? But to just discuss this. I'm grateful for that email you referred to about bringing the focus to the students. Yes, the towns are speaking, and we keep hearing town, town, town. And I know the school is a cornerstone of the community, but ultimately it's the students. And when we're seeing 60% of the students not proficient in basic things, we can do better than that. And how do we do that? I'm very interested in the why criteria for keeping the schools open. And I hope we can frame it as, how do we keep the schools open? And not just the physical buildings, but how do we keep the students, how do we maximize the achievement of the students? How do we do best by the students? Instead of thinking of it as closing schools, keeping them open, keeping the students learning, and reframing it that way. I wish Peter Conlon was here, because I'm very interested in at the last meeting, I think what he said was that he was interested in the town, the district, the board in the town. And I think that's a change, and I would really love to hear what he has to say. And he's not here today to talk. And then one of the other things that come to mind as far as the why and the criteria, and like, what are the criteria for keeping these schools open? Real numbers with our current state of the world when it comes to building materials and the cost of contractors and transportation as we move forward with all this. That Truex Collins report is pre-COVID. How valid is that? I don't know. I haven't looked through it with a fine-tooth comb, but when we are thinking about what's in the best interest of the students and how do we keep these schools open, I anticipate it's going to be a very laborious process to look at the real numbers of transportation and, remodeling buildings and bringing them up to code and all that. And I'm prepared to put in the time and put in the work. But it is taking a disproportionate amount of time. And I don't like that either. We have a lot of other things that we need to work on. And we're spending so much time on this that I feel like there are things that we're just losing sight of. And, already for me, a year and a half has gone by, and we haven't had a serious discussion about, I know our educators, our employees are working on this achievement gap, but, I want to hear more about that. And the preschool question, and it keeps getting tabled, and all the policies, they keep getting tabled, and I don't know how to bring it back into balance. I'm kind of glad we're going to do the 5:30 start time. It's like I'm going to have to bring a snack. I brought some cheese today. That got me going. So as long as I bring my cheese, I'm okay. So I just want to spend time on this, and I remember when we finished with the flag policy, I felt really proud of that, and I want to feel that way about this too. I want to feel like we really did a good job, and maybe compromise. We're all going to have to see from each other's perspective, but I just want to feel good about what we arrive at, whether it's just us or the electorate or however it is, that the process is admirable and just, the best that we can possibly pull together with all of our collective intelligence and dedication. So thank you all for taking the time to even consider slowing it down, and I hope we can do good as well as we possibly can for our students. And those achievement caps, are narrowed, and the test scores improve, and it's as a result of some really great planning and decision making that we can applaud ourselves for putting that time in. So I don't know where I'd vote today. I just hope I don't have to vote today, because I feel like I need a lot more information. So anyways, thanks.
Just 3 quick things. I actually enjoyed listening to Lindsay talk about the possibility of considering how to keep a school open and criteria that might be needed to do that. Secondly, in terms of what Jamie was talking about, I've spent a little bit of time on the internet, and there is historical data there talking about the ramifications of closing schools. So if anybody's interested in finding that information, go to it on Google or wherever you can find it. It may be harder to get here in Vermont. You really have to search and call and so on to see what happened to the towns. Third, if you have what I would call objective educational criteria for either keeping a school open or for closing it, you may not be able to compromise.
All right.
Yeah, just, kind of a follow-up as well. I think one of the things that we really should do is even kind of drill down, and I would love to learn maybe from Wyndham, some of the thought process that went into why, what they put into their article, which basically, they have a district-wide vote now, but they have a study, right? And part of that study is to look at the impacts that education, that students, at least, the most vulnerable kids may have if that school closes. And the beauty of doing that is that even if we end up having to close that school, you have knowledge about what you have to mitigate and what you have to do to, compensate and ensure that you haven't lost several kids in the process of closing their school. That's just one example, and the fact parents can't get involved, that kind of thing. So I think looking at this a little broader, it's not just black and white. There's other things I think we have to consider. And, investigating what Wyndham did. Does a similar approach work for us and make it easier to make that compromise of what we could vote on? That was kind of my point in the beginning is, there's more to this.
First of all, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to offer just honest opinions. And I appreciate the stamina of you guys sitting and listening to us and how difficult this is for all of us to hear and talk about. And I guess the thing that I just want to kind of go back to is, I'm hearing we need more time on this, we need more effort on this, we need more detail, and I'm concerned about the amount of bandwidth that this board has to devote to this issue versus the other very important responsibilities of a school board, and supporting our educators and supporting our students and working on the achievement gap, which frankly is kind of an embarrassment. And I think we can do better and should be doing better. And I feel like the studying and the amount of studying that is involved, that's what we should be studying. That, I think, is where our attentions need to be directed. And so and perhaps, as we continue to spin our wheels on this particular issue, I worry that, we're not doing what we've taken an oath to do. And then the other thing is, I think it's important to really connect serving the students and doing it well and some of the struggles that we have as a district, like staffing issues. I sometimes wonder, do we have enough staff for our student body? Do we have enough staff for the number of kids in our district? If they were in one building, 2 buildings, 3 buildings, 4 buildings, is that, is the issue of, our not having enough professionals to attend to our kids' needs, is it related to that? It seems like it could be. I feel like there is a connection between how we distribute our resources and how we're meeting our kids' and educators' needs. It's just so fundamental. And I feel like that keeps getting pushed off to the side. Yeah, but, this issue. And I'm not saying it's not an important concern and that we don't need to put time and effort into making sure that parents feel welcome and connected to the district, to the board, to the schools. I think that's very important. But I really struggle with, elevating this to the front burner and to have it sit there on the front burner for years and months. I just don't think that's what we should be spending our time on. And I do think, Jamie was talking about, wanting to see the evidence of or this perpetual fear about
you know, the district going bankrupt because the town won't close. But, you know, I think we just need to remember how close we were to the financial cliff 5 years ago before COVID. And the work that the board at the time, I wasn't on the board at that time, what they were trying to do to position, to make sure that they were still able to meet kids' needs and to provide educators and distribute resources. And, you know, there's all this like reaction about it, and I feel like we got to connect to the financial reality. I mean, we have to. We have to have an understanding and agreement that we have financial realities that we have to work within. And, you know, I sometimes feel like disengaging from that feels to me like climate change denial sometimes.
Yeah.
It just feels like it's our reality. It's kind of like Jen saying, you know, we are a district in a democracy. You know, these are the parameters that we need to work within. And so many times I just feel like I wish we could come together. Like if I were to have a public meeting, I would show this one of the scenes from Apollo 13 when they're all stuck out in space and the guy dumps a bunch of stuff on the table with the engineers and he's like, we need to get this part to fit into this part. Go. And like that's the reality they're dealing with. I feel like there's just so much conceptual talk about we got to work within the reality, and our financial circumstances are reality. And we may not be feeling the pain right now because we're luxuriating in ESSER money, but that is not going to be here forever. And the changes that the state is making will impact us. And I do think there is a connection between you know, the vacancies that we're unable to fill and how many, you know, how spread out our kids are. I think there is a connection that we have to talk about. It sucks. It is really difficult to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it, but we have to if we're going to come to some kind of solution. So compromise is going to have to, you know, acknowledge, and I can't remember who said it, you know, common understanding of the facts at hand. And anyway, you all know my position. I feel pretty strongly that the district needs to maintain authority over its decision making. But you know, if we don't feel ready to come together about this, I feel like there's a lot of other really important things that we could and should be working on. So,
You want to table it?
It already is.
You've taken it off, I think.
Yeah.
There's no motion before the board, is my understanding.
Yeah, there is no motion.
There is no
There's
motion.
Yeah.
So I think I want to thank everyone for their contribution tonight. I know that I can feel that it's weighing on everyone over the last however long. And I am thankful that you all have been eloquent in sharing your sides of the issue. I think to move forward, we need to decide, are we moving, are people ready? It feels like maybe not, to move forward with the language of a motion, or are we, well, let's start with that. If people feel that they're ready to move forward with the language of motion, if people are not, we can talk about what that means and what the next step would then be. Are we sending this back? Yes.
I think something just became clear to me where we as a board were trying to respond to a community request essentially that folks wanted more input, and then it kind of became like, you said, like we're almost politicizing it or like putting information out there to be political because our committee, our facilities committee is looking into the realities of our facilities. We in no way were trying to do this politically. We have different committees that are working on different real work, and trying to respond to the needs of the district and the feedback from the community in real, genuine ways. Like, I do not want to be a politician. I'm not running again because I hate the politics of this nonsense. It's become way too political. And like, your accusation that we're doing this politically hurts a lot because we're just community members. I'm a parent. I'm a citizen. I'm just trying to do my job here. And like, we don't even have to do this. We can just leave the charter the way it is. If we're all feeling like it's exhausting and we need to look into it, and if somebody wants to look into it, go for it. But as far as I'm concerned, if we're feeling like we're not feeling like this is moving in a positive direction, I'd rather sort of, table it indefinitely and not focus on this. We put the facilities master plan on hold for a reason because we don't know what the realities are. And by doing that, we're saying we're not looking at closing schools at this point in time. We wanted to be proactive and think through what would our options be, what would our ideal school district look like should we have these financial realities, so that we can have more equitable education. And if we can't get to that right now, this whole conversation is really a moot point because there's no immediate threat. Talking about fear, Jamie, we're not afraid because we know that we're not talking about closing school anytime soon. I think we were trying to allay the fears of the community that we maybe have this power, that maybe people didn't trust us with this power to use it appropriately. But I have no concerns that we're talking about closing a school at all in the next couple of years. And so I don't know that we need to focus so much of our time on this issue immediately. I know it's important to do it proactively before that conversation comes back. I think that's also in conjunction with a lot of other conversations around our district and our goals and our strategic plan for equity, which is what the district's priority is right now. So I guess I'm just feeling like this has just been a really exhausting experiment of, a month-long conversation that we were trying to do to help the community feel more engaged, and I feel like it's just backfired and inflamed those feelings between the community and the board even more. So I would opt to just kind of put this aside for the time being, if I had my choice at this point now.
Thank you. I do think that the point you make about we don't have to make any decision right now. We have an Articles of Agreement.
Yep.
We're also not discussing closing schools. And so, right, we've sort of, I think we and the community have created this sudden sense of urgency that this needs to happen now. And in reality, the discussion needs to happen over time. And we need to consider all aspects of it, but we're not under the gun to make any change, and the community is going to have to trust us when we say that there is no school plan for school closure in the next few years.
No.
So I'm not sure where that gets us in terms of progress today. I looked all over for guidelines for board chairs in discussing these sort of things, and surprisingly, there are none out there. But what I'm hearing is that people don't want to get a motion on the table today. We're not ready to do that. So let's just forget that was my goal at the beginning here, to get the language around a motion. And so I think that the next question is, are we just going to leave this for a moment and let the community continue to communicate with us, let it sort of percolate as we go through sort of our more urgent needs of the district, or do we want to sort of set a plan in place for how we move forward now? So I think that's sort of the question for the board at this moment.
I guess my fear is that if we put it away entirely, that it'll be, it'll come to a head again when we have the financial burdens really breathing heavily on us. And I did appreciate Suzanne's comment about, working on some kind of procedure or, putting some work into criteria and thoughts around how we, the why, I guess. Not just the how, not just the process, but, the actual criteria for, when we're looking at our situation and we don't have enough butter to cover the bread, what do we do? And I guess I'm a little bit concerned that if we completely wait on that, it'll sneak up and, we'll be back where we were 5 years ago. That said, I don't feel like it needs to be on the next agenda. We've been pushing off facilities master plan stuff for a report on the secondary schools and kind of touching base on that. And, we were supposed to connect with the community this fall about all that, and we haven't been because we've been talking about this. And there's budget season that we're starting. So, I don't know, I feel like the policy committee already has a lot of work on its plate, so it doesn't feel right to dump it on that committee.
No, don't dump it on us.
But maybe either, perhaps, giving it back to the ad hoc committee or creating, something with a more refined question. I don't know,
So can I just, okay, we'll go you, and then I'm going to make a point.
From what I heard from a community member, there will be a petition coming to us on this issue. We had a petition on this issue once before. We rejected, as a board, a different board then, rejected acting on that petition. And so I guess we would have a chance to rediscuss if there is a petition. To me, that's not a very good way to manage representative democracy if every issue which is big enough generates a petition, which you then have to either reject or return to the public. I just don't think that's the way it's supposed to be. But if they don't like us, they should throw us off rather than having to respond to issues by public petition.
Thank you.
So what I was going to suggest is, come January, maybe we form a group that would actually look at it, not now. We need to, maybe it's February, get beyond the budget cycle, right? Because then it'll already be being produced, all that kind of thing. And then assign a couple folks to really come up with some proposed languages or do some more investigation or be charged by address certain questions that people have, that the board has, that the board would like us to look, or that group to look into.
Yep.
And I'd be willing to, do something like that.
I wanted to talk about the people whose term will be expiring in March. And so as far as something like this goes, I don't know who's going to be running or what the outcome of the vote will be, but there is, we have people like Suzanne who drafted the original document. And if she were to choose that, say, I'm not going to run, that would be a huge loss for us as a group working together. So, and, Jen, I don't want to lose your perspective as we talk about this. So I do want to keep in the front of our mind that come March, we might have a different board. And so if we could create an ad hoc committee. I agree, we shouldn't be pouring a lot of energy into this because it's not time sensitive, and yet we don't want to be making this under duress as decisions about this. But I would love to have the knowledge base of some of these folks who have been working on this for like a decade. And I don't want to lose that opportunity if we put it off and don't even form an ad hoc committee until, January or February. So, that's just a thought.
Thank you. So I think that the consensus seems to be to delay action and perhaps re-invite the ad hoc committee to look at
That's the question.
Yeah.
What do we want them to do?
Well, I think first, I think your point to, or I think it was your point to sort of the procedure side of, what requirements, in a school environment would need to be met in order to close a school, or what needs to be met in order to not close a school. That those are important questions. But I don't think we're going to answer that tonight. I think tonight, what we're going to agree to, what we agree to, is that we're going to not make any decision, and that we will create in the next month or two, we'll either reinvent the ad hoc committee or create a new committee, depending on people's bandwidth. And at that time, when we create the committee, we'll discuss what the committee's charge will be. I'm seeing nodding. Does that make sense for everyone?
I just one, I guess, I'm just wondering, we've not been presented with the petition yet.
No.
And so I suppose that could be coming, and we'll have to deliberate on that if it is submitted to us officially, correct?
Right. It will have to be warned.
He did email it to us during this meeting.
Oh, okay.
At 7:48, he emailed us.
That's the other
That's the wording of the petition.
element.
It's not the signed petition, but it's
Okay.
like a...
So that's a separate process. And once we, once we digest it, we can warn it appropriately. Okay, so the action for tonight is that we're agreeing to no action with promise of future coming together to look more deeply at this issue.
Do we actually have to take action on that?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
There's no motion on the floor.
There's no
But I'm
motion.
saying if we said that there was action, do we have to make action to not?
No.
It
was just there. It was just there
We don't mess up.
in case we wanted to take action.
Yeah, I just was wondering if we could agree on some sort of timing, like after the budget cycle, or like you said like a month or two.
Yep.
Which in my mind, I don't know what that means.
Right.
But
I guess in my head, I'm sort of thinking what Barb said, sort of January.
Okay.
Get us through
We're
the part of the budget and the holidays and whatnot, and allow us a little bit of time to get some other work done, and then revisit one of the meetings in January.
I just want to say that I think the most important thing to come out of this conversation tonight is something that Mary raised, that we all seem to have this general sense that there's this one thing that we're caring about, which no doubt it matters to a lot of people, but has less urgency. And this sort of academic achievement outcomes thing is something that we all seem to have sort of we care about, but for some reason, like, it hasn't been on the front burner as much as all of us would like. And I think that however we things get put on different burners. Like there seems to be some general consensus among us that like dealing with that in a very real, concerted way. I mean, I was just talking about this last week, and when you ran through those numbers, I was like, I'd forgotten about that, you know, when we discussed it 6 months earlier. And so I feel like however that happens, we should make sure that doesn't get lost in this conversation, because those numbers are quite startling.
Just to a point though, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. People have been dealing with this.
For sure.
Let's not say that faculty and administration haven't been aware and dealing with this, so.
Not at all, not at all.
I just want to put that out there, that this is not something that's been disregarded, and the board needs to step up and make it all better, so just to be sure on that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make the point, and I think Mary Heather makes it very clear. We do have financial constraints, and if we have to use our dollars wisely, I want it to be focused on the students, keeping teachers, and making sure that's where I want the money to go. I don't, when kids come to school, they're coming to school for their teachers and their friends, and for an exciting day, most of the time. They're not coming because what the building looks like. So we had a student on our committee last year who is no longer with us, and he said at the end of the day, by the time you get to the middle school and the high school, you don't care what happened in grammar school. You just want to continue being with your friends and learning. So they don't think about it so much. So I think we have to realize that kids, what's the focus? It's our children, it's the teachers making sure they're qualified and that they have the resources they need. The buildings, we don't need so much, and we shouldn't be looking so much at the buildings. We have to make sure they're safe, but we don't need so many. That's all I'm saying. I think we need to be more wise about that.
All right, we're going to move on. Thanks. Board stipends. This is kind of an interesting one to follow. So this came up.
$10,000. Highest bidder. Hey, open up that envelope.
So this has come up because a couple board members have brought it up over the last few months, that some other boards in the area have greater stipends. The board discussed this, help me Chip, a few years ago.
I don't remember, honestly. It was longer than that. Peter would remember, he was here, but.
4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Okay. And at that time, we raised the amount to $500. Obviously, this is not an income. The idea of the board stipend is to be able to offset cost incurred, such as babysitting or having to get a meal out rather than cooking it at home on board meeting days and that sort of thing. So I guess tonight we just wanted to sort of bring it to the table. I know that I had emailed everyone a while back to think about how they felt about increasing a board stipend. So that's what this is. So does anyone have any thoughts, questions?
I have a question.
How they feel about
yeah.
this part?
I think, I have jet lag, so I may not remember correctly. I've been up almost 20 hours. Yeah. What I believe I read, it's $500, and then each year that goes up? 500?
No, we have $500 a year if you do your
Oh, just 500 per year?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, I misunderstood how that was written.
Yep.
Good, thank you.
And I think as in other districts, Suzanne, do you remember there's some other districts who
Addison Northwest and Mount A raised theirs several years ago, and I think Mount A might be $3,500 for the board chair, and then the rest of the body might get $1,800. I think Addison Northwest is similar.
How large are their
career center, the the Career Center, the directors get $1,200 a year, and the board chair gets an additional $1,500 stipend on top of that.
So I don't really know how I feel about board stipends. I do feel like this is a volunteer organization, but at the same time, I don't want people to feel that they can't afford to be on the board and have that be a barrier to entry. So if people feel that $500 is not enough to sort of not make it a barrier, we personally, speaking for myself, I would rather see money like that spent on something else. But maybe there's a solution, like there's a board slush fund or something, and if someone has particular need because, they require 2 babysitters, or whatever it is, they can apply for, or they can submit receipts for reimbursement or something, so that we're not necessarily across the board raising the amount, but we're providing access to funds so that it's not a barrier. That's just a thought.
Yeah, I was thinking about this as well, and we're doing equity for the, for our district, right?
Right.
I also think we need to be looking at equity for the board, right?
Right.
And I don't have babysitting needs.
Right.
Thank God. So must be funny about that. For me, to get more of a stipend, I think it's crazy. I really do. But I would really like to see there be some ability to pay for babysitting, to, do something so that it enables others to participate on the board, so that it's not just folks without kids, and because it's so much harder.
Yep.
It's definitely so much harder. So I think an equity lens, looking at this as we're trying to do with our strategic plan for equity, makes a whole lot of sense to me. And so I'm kind of resonating with what those were my same thoughts, is how can we do something to help those that really need a little bit extra, or in order to participate in a committee meeting, maybe, they're not going to get paid, that, they have to take off work an hour early and they're not being paid. Those are the things that come to my mind that I worry about.
Suzanne, and then.
So the other thing that I know is that some board members do not take their stipend. I think even with the $500 stipend, there's been board members in the past that have, the check has come out and they turned right around and resubmitted it back to the district, so they didn't take it. So, of course, that's all done so that nobody knows about it.
Right.
But I just happen to know a couple of people that told me they had done it. So that's another piece to think about, is that not everyone keeps their stipends. We might vote to increase them, but who knows how many of them are actually kept. So, maybe people that turn their stipends back in, that could be the slush fund. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's getting late. Okay, my brain is turning off.
Lindsay, and then we're gonna.
I'm one of the people who approached Victoria, and I want to be transparent about that. I was on the fence about even running for a seat on the school board, partly for financial reasons. I get paid hourly, and I miss a lot of work for the school board. When I go to a committee meeting, those are hours I'm not getting paid for. I had to leave every board meeting. I have to leave work early. Sometimes I have to Zoom because I don't have coverage for my son, and I'm not going to spend $50 to $100 to be able to attend a meeting. And I don't have time to go and get takeout food between work and here, because that's another half an hour I'm not getting paid for. So that's the equity lens that when I read in the paper, the Career Center, $2,500 for the board chair, $1,200 for each board member, $2,000 for the treasurer. Slate Valley, $1,200 per person, board chair $1,500, treasurer $1,200. Mount Abe, $7,200 for the treasurer, and I'm thinking, is that even a board position? I want to do that. Can I be the treasurer? Mount Abe?
That's not that's the elected treasurer.
Okay, I was like, what? Is that can't be the same thing? I'm going to be the treasurer. And $2,400 for the board chair, $1,200, and it's like, and I don't want to have to apply for a slush fund. I'm so sick of that. Like, can just make things affordable for me, so I don't have to like, you know, oh, do you have like financial aid for this? Do you have financial aid for that? That's like an equity thing to make people jump through these extra hoops to be able to do things. So I'm just like coming out as somebody who actually like, you know, like I didn't do this so that I could make money, but I actually lose money being on the board, a significant amount of money. And some of the hours I can make up by like working late, but then that cuts into my time with my son. But, you know, I have flexibility, but it's not total flexibility. Like if I added up all the hours that I lost, it's a heck of a lot more than $1,200 or $500 or whatever that is. So I'm certain that there are other people who would consider running for the board if there were childcare offered, if there was food offered, if it was more hospitable to people who are single parents, or maybe they're a two-parent family with 4 kids and they don't know what to do with all their kids. But, you know, it's disproportionately people who are two-parent household, you know, two-parent, two-income households, retirees, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to do it anyways. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, why am I doing this? Like, but I'm, you know. So, anyways, that was me who emailed her about that.
I appreciate.
Thank you for raising it.
We're glad you did. Did you see her?
Since this is not listed as an action item,
no.
Can I suggest that you create some proposal for the next meeting and have it as an action item there?
Yep.
And we move on.
Yep, I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you. All right, so that's what we'll do, and that brings us to other. Is there any other? Seeing no other, can I have a motion to move into executive session, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Great. We don't need to vote, right? It's correct. 9:38.
And technically, we needed to state why we were moving.